All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our fall Finance and Business Affairs Division meeting and Town Hall. We haven't had one of our regular division meetings since before COVID. I know we've had a few town halls that have been totally focused on COVID, and I wanted to get back to our division meetings uh, to have some semblance of order outside of COVID, to give everyone a few minutes of break away from some of the pandemic issues that we've been dealing with. So thank you for taking an hour out of this morning to meet with us. So just by way of review, as we start each of our division meetings, we are Bengals, and we have a culture that's rooted in trust, compassion, stability, and hope. And I think that you will see each of the four of these pillars being demonstrated, or values being demonstrated, in some of the successes that we talk about today. And then the other piece of review is just the university that we talked for a minute about. I talked for a minute about the university strategic plan. We have 5 goals that we've laid out in front of the State Board of Education. Number 1 is growing enrollment. Number 2 is strengthen retention. 3 is to promote ISU's identity. 4 is to strengthen communication, transparency, and inclusion. And 5th is to enhance community partnerships. And while we've been really focused on keeping the university open this fall, so that students who wanted an on-campus experience could have that on-campus experience, and that's where a lot of our focus has been. We've still been focusing also on what do we need to do to grow enrollments. The enrollment management team has been doing great work in trying to hone our strategy for that. Strengthen retention. Every one of us can help with retention. Even in a virtual environment, we come into contact with students. And then those of you who actually come into physical contact with students, whatever we can do to help resolve the issues that they may be having, or just making a friend, can help us increase our retention. There's been a lot of work done over the last 6 or 7 months, continued work, but even ramped up a little bit, and facilities has been involved with that in promoting ISU's identity. You'll see a few slides from that in a few minutes. And then we've been continuing to try to strengthen our communication, transparency with campus, letting campus know what's happening, letting all of you know what's happening. And finally, we've still been working with outside entities to enhance our community partnerships. This morning, I'd like to do is to hit on 5 things. 1 is people. 2 is to celebrate some of the successes that you all have been part of and that our division has been part of. A very brief financial outlook. 4th, we'll be hearing from Dr. Rex Force, who will give us a COVID health update. And then probably the last 20 or 25 minutes will be into a Q&A period where I'll be happy to answer, and our leadership team will be happy to answer any questions you may have. And Rex will also be here to answer any specific COVID health related questions. And this is one thing I've missed. We haven't had our division-wide meeting since last winter. I really like it when we're all together in the auditorium and we can see new faces, we can see each other, but we're just going to have to settle for Zoom today. And what I'd like to do is welcome our new staff within our division. And as you know, we've had a hiring freeze or slowdown on for most of this fiscal year. So we really haven't had a lot of new hires, but we have had some new hires in some key positions. Gabriella Cole and Morgan Manship in the Idaho Falls custodial department have joined us. Jamie Wallentine as a new financial tech in the budget and planning and analysis organization. And then finally, we have hired our new CIO, Renee Scott, and Renee joins us from the University of Montana. And I think she's probably in her maybe 5th week this week. So welcome to our team and welcome to the division. But along with new people, we've also had a lot of new roles. And first of all, I want to tell you that I want to issue an apology that if I've missed any of you who've had a major shift in a new role, I apologize for that. And you're welcome to signal Jenny via chat if I left you out, and I should call you out. So hopefully I will hit the major changes that we've had. Um, in the facilities area, Becky Robinson is new to our team, but not new to the university. She's moved over from the policy area in the president's office, and she's now a project coordinator working with all of our project managers for Cheryl in facilities. And Melissa Myers moved from the accounting office to the Bengal Depot to give us some much needed new eyes in looking at how we manage the Bengal Depot. Environmental health and safety, we've had for the better part of a year, if not more, we've had two co-directors in place. When Clark left us, we wanted to reassess environmental health and safety. So we had two co-directors in place. And within the last month or last couple of weeks, we've now made a formal decision on the org chart. And Jennifer Parrott is the director. And the other co-director, former co-director, was Nancy Fox, and she will be the associate director for occupational health. And so I just want to thank both of them for the work they've done in the past year as co-directors, keeping EH&S going, particularly as we moved into a pandemic and that we were short-staffed in their area. In the controller shop, Bob Height retired and left at the end of June, and Angie Dobbins has assumed Bob's duties as the new controller. We did not replace Angie's position, but rather it was eliminated through the budget cuts. And Brandon Clausen is now taking on duties as the financial reporting and analysis manager. And Cheryl Reese moved from the student accounts area into the financial reporting and analysis area. In the business, the budget planning and analysis group, Megan Baskins is a new UBO, and she's assigned to student affairs. She moved over from financial reporting and analysis. Kate, I'm going to try my best. Zients, yes. Kate Zients is a senior accountant now, and Michelle Runyon has moved into a financial tech position. And then in the IT area, Ben Mills has moved from his position into a network administrator position. And I left Tony Lovegren on here for the last name I wanted to talk about for just a minute. Tony has returned to his deputy CIO role once Renee joined us, but I just want to say that publicly recognize that Tony just really stepped up in the first 9 months of this year when he assumed the interim CIO role. I think when he stepped into that role, he thought he was going to probably just take care of a few things here or there. While we did our CIO search, little did he know that we would be in the midst of a pandemic. We would be rewiring campus. We would be bringing distance technology to nearly all of our classrooms on campus. He would have to turn into an inventory or manage an inventory program of acquiring and loaning laptops to students and faculty who needed them. And he just really stepped up and hit it out of the park. But thank you, Tony, and I'm glad you're still with us, and you'll be a valuable asset, continue to be a valuable asset to the team and to Renee as she comes aboard. Were there any other new roles, new positions that I may have failed to mention? Ginny's not signaling me, so I don't think anybody signaled her. Um, so now's the fun part. And this is the other part that I really missed in not having our division meetings. And that's just us taking 10 or 15 minutes to just really celebrate the successes and achievements we had. And I've subtitled this highlights in 220, and it probably should, or 2020, and it probably should have been subtitled or titled more than COVID response. Because you're going to see in a few minutes, we're going to talk about a few of the achievements that you all have made during the last 6 months of the pandemic in your response to COVID. But I think what's more impressive to me is when I look at the achievements and the successes that you all have had, they're not just in responding to the pandemic. You all kept things going while responding to the pandemic. Um, so let me go into the first one in the budget planning and analysis area. Just as the pandemic hit, we were going through a budget process, a new budget process. Jen Steele and the UBOs were just paramount in leading us through this process and in the success we had. And we had to shift on the fly. We were planning to take 2, 3, 4 years to address our structural deficit. But as you all know, our financial position last year eroded some, and then we had the pandemic facing us. And so through the work of all of leadership across campus, but at Jen's direction and leading, we've eliminated the structural deficit going forward. That doesn't mean we're totally out of the woods, but it means we stepped up, and there were over 100 positions, or approximately 100 positions that were eliminated from the budget. About half of those were filled and half of those were unfilled positions. But we took $11.8 million of expense out of our budget. And so the board yesterday in the audit committee meeting was very complimentary to the work that we had done and the way that you all had taken this on head on. Also during this time, budget planning analysis in conjunction with the controller and with some help from ITS, have unveiled some new financial reporting and budgeting tools and resources. We were hearing a lot of good things from deans across campus and others that they're getting a better picture of where they are financially within the year from the standardized reports. And then finally, and you're going to see DocuSign talked about a few times today. We took a risk last year and went out on a limb in finance administration, and we purchased the DocuSign license. We put a team together of some of you who are on this call or in the division to look at how could we use DocuSign. And the work that team did, that was made up of individuals from budget planning and analysis, from HR, and from the controller's office. Lisa LaShawn was heavily involved early on, as well as Ray, in putting together some initial ways we could use DocuSign. And because of that initial work, once the pandemic hit and we went to remote reporting, working from home, a number of your areas started using DocuSign, and it really has mushroomed, and it made us look like we had planned for this. But it was actually, I think, the forward look that all of you had regarding the potential for DocuSign and the work that you did before the pandemic that put us in a position to really start putting process improvements in place. In the controller's office, again, we've implemented a new financial reporting tool, and we're actually getting reports now of budget to actuals during the year. And so it's really improved transparency and tracking of our financial results. We were able to streamline and improve processes within the controller's area. And that enabled us to operate with fewer staff as we eliminated some positions in that area. And then the financial forecasting. In the past, we did a very brief high level look, but we weren't really regimented in that. And under Angie Dobbins' leadership, with Brandon's help and others, and on the budget planning and analysis side, both organizations have come together, and it was really nice at the end of the first quarter uh, for us to be able to sit down with the president's office and talk to the president about where we really think we are in terms of our financials right now and what that means for the rest of the year. That's something that was not in place when I first arrived. So thanks to the work of many of you who are on this call on the controllers and budget and planning analysis side of getting us there. And finally, not the least, but the last on this slide in all caps, once again, we had no audit findings in our recent audit for last fiscal year. That's a testament to how thorough all of you are who touch the financial transactions. And I continue to hear praises. From the first day I walked in to this position, I heard from our external auditor at Moss Adams about what a great accounting process we have and team we have. And it's been a number of years since we've had any audit findings. So no pressure, Angie and team. You just keep it up going forward, but let's take a few minutes today to just sit back and acknowledge the fact that you all did a great job in the last round. Also, having no audit findings means we don't have a lot of interaction with the board when it comes to our financial statements, and it gives them a level of comfort that we are on top of things and that we're focusing on the right things. I need to take a big breath on this one with facility services, because most of you are on the front lines. Most of you are considered essential workers, and you have been on campus every day through this entire ordeal. Not only have you been on campus every day doing your regular jobs, you've been sanitizing classrooms. You have refigured every classroom on campus for social distancing. You've worked in all of the high traffic areas, if not all of the areas on campus, putting up signs, figuring out 6 feet distancing. Just an amazing amount of work keeping the campus looking nice and keeping the campus safe. But on top of that, we've had a number of projects. If we want to go back to recruiting and retention, the feel of campus is so important when we have new students and families consider, or they come to campus and are considering sending their child or enrolling themselves in campus at Idaho State University. How they feel is a major factor in their final decision. But then it's not just what it looks like when they get here or when they're visiting. It's what is it like every day. And I'm singing to the choir when I tell you that I've noticed, because I know you all have noticed, different areas of campus are just outdated, and things are not always matched. And things, we have a lot of mismatched items. And along with that same line of the campus feel, one of our charter items that Cheryl has been responsible for was coming up with an interior palette, interior colors. What's our design palette? Sorry, I can't. And so what is our what's our design palette? And so that helps us so that when we're going in to refresh an area, we don't have someone who, well, I don't like this shade of orange, I want another shade of orange. Or they see orange, but it's really red. Just crazy things like that. And before I go any further, I also want to say that on top of all this, and the projects that we were doing, the president charged us with 2 projects at the beginning of summer. One was the Ambassador Walk. And that was for Cheryl and a team. And I know I'm going to leave some names out here, but I know Michelle was involved in this. And then also our moderator, who's not in our division, but Jenny Larimore was also involved in these 2 projects this summer, because Jenny is responsible for kind of the campus, what the campus look and feel is. And so she works very closely with our facilities group and with Michelle in making sure that we're getting the right feel. So we had 2 projects. One was the Ambassador Walk, and that's the walk that students and families take when they visit ISU. And the president had noticed on that walk that things they didn't look crisp, clean, sharp, current. And so he challenged us to go on that Ambassador Walk and figure out what we could do to bring things up to speed quickly and relatively cost effective wise. The second project was a much larger one that we bit off a chunk this summer, and that was to look at all of the student facing areas in all of our buildings. Where do students congregate in the life science building? Where do students congregate in the College of Business? And I went on some of those walks, and it was really embarrassing. We actually, in one area, I heard a new term, and that was, I think it was wall carpet, where the wall literally had carpet attached to it. No paneling, which is outdated, but no paneling, no paint, but carpet. We had a lot of kiosks that were just sitting on like crash carts that are used to move things around. The other thing that was very disconcerting to me is the number and types of bulletin boards we had. It looked like somebody may have made one at home, and this is I'm not saying anything about the great carpenters we have. I mean, but there are some that just did not look like, I know they didn't come out of our shop. Let me say it that way. And so Ginny and Michelle and Cheryl worked on what can we do for bulletin boards, for instance, to have a more uniform look. So you're looking right now at Reed Gym, which was one of the areas on the Ambassador Walk where we went in and did a number of updates to Reed Gym. As you can just see, the entrance going out to Cadet Field, fresh paint. We have new banners. We've put in charging stations. Charging stations were one of the things we've added to a lot of the places on campus. And we also put in new carpet. You can see the hallways in Reed Gym. It looks totally different. So for those of you who have been working, who were not essential to be on campus, but were essential, and you're all essential, you're essential, but working from home, you may not have even seen some of these things yet. So when you do come to campus, I encourage you to just walk through Reed Gym, and you'll notice a big difference. We've been hearing a lot of feedback from the people who work in there, in that building and in that space, about just the change of the feel. And then finally, while all of this was going on, and for those of you who may not have been on campus very much, you may not recognize this. This is Davis Field. The old concrete bleachers that had been condemned on the east side, and the ones on the west side that were not very far away from being condemned, those are gone. The berm on the south side of the field is gone. We had to remove it so we could enlarge the field. We now have a regulation size soccer field in place. We have a track that is now, legal's not the right word, but we can host, Cheryl, help me if I use the wrong, or if you have the right term here, but we're able to host NCAA events now. We're able to host home track meets in the spring. And so this is a picture from up on Red Hill, or to the a little bit to the south of Red Hill looking down. One of the things you can't see from here is the new retaining wall that is on the east side. That is a beautiful addition. It really blends with the hill. And then there's a gradual slope of berm seating on that side. So next week is the ribbon cutting or dedication of Davis Field. So the facilities team has not only been focusing on keeping us safe and keeping our students safe and keeping us open, they've accomplished, you all have just accomplished amazing things over the last 4 or 5 months, in addition to your COVID related activities. In the human resources area, again, just as in facilities and just as I had mentioned earlier, Tony didn't expect that things would be what things would be like given a pandemic. I'm sure Brian Sagendorf, excuse me, now I feel like I'm former President Trump or President Trump with that fly. Uh, but HR has been short-staffed, but then they've been working very closely with other leaders on campus in Marcom and coming up with various aspects of the COVID-19 rebound plan, the employee operations guidelines. These are things that were not on the table earlier this year. One of the things that was on the table earlier this year, which they did in spite of everything else going on, that was digitizing the employment contracts through DocuSign. The process went smoother than any of us could ever have expected. And that's just a testament to again, the support in ITS and Ray Ludwig and some of the other individuals who worked on that team. During all this, they also designed and implemented an updated respectful workplace training. This was a requirement from the state, and we had to do this, and this was done during all of the COVID work as well. And then finally, this was an idea that the HR department came up with. We took it to admin council and leadership council. It was blessed. And Brian and team have now introduced a Be Well Bengals employee wellness plan. In the ITS area, I alluded to a little bit of this when I talked about Tony, but the responsiveness has been unbelievable. I mean, we have taken a very large number of IT resources and have moved them off campus, and those individuals have been able to work remotely, providing the same level of support as they did when they were on campus. But in terms of our network, we've extended the network capacity to 124 classroom locations. We set up Wi-Fi in some areas outside of Holt and in the parking lot outside the sub, so that students could still access our Wi-Fi and not have to go inside. This was done at the start of the pandemic. One of the interesting pieces here is as we talk about enhancing our relationship with the community, Tony and I got a big chuckle at some of the early stats when he gave them to me about the number of users who are using accessing our Wi-Fi from the parking lot. And to our surprise, it wasn't our students, but it was a lot of the K-12 students for the Pocatello area schools, because they didn't have good access at home. And so we were able to provide that access to them in a safe environment. And so it's just things like that I just don't think people we don't celebrate this all the time. You know, we're really focused on what's ahead of us tomorrow, and it's just amazing the amount of work that the ITS staff had to do. We've pumped a lot of dollars into upgrading the network. We've changed some policies, such as our policies around VPN, because we used to have so many limited VPN connections available. And as we started down this path, Tony and his team worked to identify what were the best possible solutions to expand this so it wouldn't crash when faculty started logging in from home. Also, the health clinics have remained open through all of this, and they've needed all of our support from facilities to IT, just to be open to do their jobs. And finally, in the midst of all that response, we've been working on EAB implementation, or I don't know if it's implementation yet, but at least planning and trying to get ready for EAB, which is a product that will help our faculty and student affairs track students through the system. It's an early warning system for when students are struggling, so that this should help us be able to provide interventions so we can increase retention and don't lose students through the cracks, which is what happens when you don't have these early intervention tools. And the single sign-on integration project is continuing forward, and we will all be going to first name, last name, email addresses very shortly. You'll be seeing some information on that in the coming weeks. Environmental health and safety. As I mentioned earlier, we were with two co-directors for little over the last year. We've been short-staffed in EH&S, and sometimes I think environmental health and safety is kind of one of those forgotten areas, but they provide so many things to keep our campus safe. They do so many things to keep us safe. And early on in the pandemic, they created Project PPE, which they centralized all of our critical PPE, and Cheryl's team helped with that as well, and others around campus, where we had 30 departments donate PPE into this centralized inventory so we could then get it distributed to our operating clinics. They've been very active in the operations committee and the health and safety committees in terms of the response to the pandemic, and their guidance has been a valuable asset, I think, to Rex and his team in that regard. Yeah, I want to go. Okay. They also fit tested 260 students, faculty, and staff with N95 masks. If you recall, the N95 masks were the ones that there were critical shortage on, and there's requirements to make sure that everyone's trained in how to use this type of PPE, and they've continued to support staff working in the clinics. And while all this is going on, they're still continuing to collect hazardous materials or oversee the collection and disposal of hazardous materials. If I move quickly to public safety, during the last probably 8 months, they've installed contactless card readers on the outside of 14 of our buildings, so that prevents you from having to touch door handles and gives us a little bit safer access to the buildings. We've had 2 officers join the Southeast Idaho Domestic and Sexual Violence Task Force, and also the local gang task force. They were involved in helping us establish the testing site on campus, where we've tested over 4,000 people. And one of the more mundane things, but a very important thing that we don't find out about unless it's too late, they evaluated all the AEDs across campus. We had a number of AEDs that were, the batteries were past their useful life. And these were primarily put in with a grant several years ago, and there was not a replenishment plan in place. And so Lewis and his team right now are working on what would a replenishment plan look like, so we can get that in the budget, and just that would be an ongoing safety measure that we would take on every year. And finally, they coordinated response, crowd control, and evacuations in firefighter operations for 3 large fires near and on campus. This is a picture from the fire that was up near the Eames complex. It did not come on a property. Landscape Services was phenomenal in how quick they turned on the sprinklers as soon as we were notified of the fire. And it kept all of our landscape wet. The fire did not jump the fence. However, it got close enough to melt a number of our sprinkler heads. So I know I ran through those real quick, and I know I didn't hit everything that you all have been doing, but I think as a team, if we look at that, we can get a really good appreciation for just the wide amount of work that our division has been completing, while at the same time being active in the responses to the pandemic. Real quick on a financial update. This is a slide that we've been sharing with the other groups during the town halls. Right now, we went into this year knowing we were going to use 2.7 million in reserves. We did balance our budget. However, a number of the faculty positions required 1-year notification before we could eliminate those positions. So we won't realize that $2.7 million of savings until next year. So that's why we had a projected deficit for this year. And at the same time, we're saying we solved our structural deficit. It was a one-time dip into that. So that's where we were going into the year. And on top of that, the governor announced a $5 million, 5% or $5 million holdback of our state appropriation. So the way that we addressed the $5 million holdback was through the hiring freeze. We said we would save 2.7 million, and through the furloughs, we would save 2 million. So that essentially offsets that 5 million. So going into the year, 2.7 million deficit, and we had the additional 5 million that we had to resolve. We have plans in place for both of those. However, our fall enrollments were not as strong as we planned or would have liked. Our undergraduate enrollment was down around 7%, I believe. Our graduate enrollment was up 4 or 5%. And overall, our enrollments were down. If they stay on the same track they're on right now, we will have about another $2.9 million of deficit for the remainder of the year. So given the fact that now out of $250 million, that's a little over 1%. That's pretty darn good considering everything that we are up against right now. But it's not good enough to erase the $5 million of the holdback and cover this 2.9. So essentially the context and the environment hasn't changed in which we made the decision for the hiring freeze and the furloughs. So at this point in time, the spring furloughs will continue as planned. And I think there was a campus-wide announcement that went out last night or this morning that talks about that. Now, there's several variables that'll impact where we land for this fiscal year. Spring enrollment. If our retention is better than what our historic fall to spring retention is, that will help. If it is not, that will hurt us and create another challenge. We're really unsure of what's happening with athletics and the other auxiliaries activities in the spring. Unsure in that we don't know what type of distancing we'll have to provide. Will there be a vaccine so that we don't have to worry about distancing and we can host these events again? But there are revenues associated with those spring activities. We've already planned to not get those revenues. So if we're able to generate more revenues off of those activities, that will help. And then finally, President Satterley has been working with the other presidents and with the board office. I've been working with the CFOs, and we've crafted at the president's with the president's leadership, we've crafted an argument for possible additional COVID relief funds or relinquishing some of that holdback. I'm not holding my breath on any of those things, but certainly if that happens, we can revisit where we are financially for as we get into the spring. We don't know when we'll hear on that. So that's why we are still going forward with the spring furloughs as planned. And then finally, the work that Jen's been doing with enrollment management, we will have revenue estimates available in early January, which will then drive what our expense targets are for the next fiscal year. And we'll be able to go into our budget setting process with a more informed financial outlook. And now I want to turn it over to Rex real quick to give a COVID health update.
Thanks, Glenn. Hi, everybody. First of all, I'd like to echo what Glenn said about the collaboration and support that the COVID health team has received from people in facilities and in finance and in IT and HR and all of the units in finance and business affairs. We have received a ton of great support on the COVID Health Committee, and frequently we've been asking for, at least at times, asking for the impossible. Cheryl knows this better than anybody, but we have gotten a tremendous amount of help. And really, if it wasn't for this kind of collaboration, we wouldn't have been able to keep the campus as safe as we've been able to keep it over the course of fall semester. I will say, though, that that there are still quite a bit of COVID disease in the community. I think most people are aware of that. In Southeast Idaho in particular, we're seeing levels of cases that are down a tiny bit from peaks in October, but for the most part are still at very, very concerning levels. I think you all know that we're operating at ISU at kind of a modified yellow level, in between yellow and orange. The admin council will be meeting again today to reassess our operational level. I anticipate that we will stay at the same level because we have not seen significant increases of cases or changes in most of our metrics over the last week. We probably have about the same number of cases, although I haven't seen a final number yet for the last week's reporting period, but probably have a similar number as we did last week, which is in the 50s in our campus community, down from a peak, I think, of 69 back in mid to early October. And that's all good, but I also think that folks are a little fatigued with dealing with this. And we're not getting as many COVID self-report forms as we have been getting in the past. That could be true. It could be just a trend in decreasing cases, but it also could be that folks are not as likely to fill out those forms. So that being said, we encourage anybody who has the symptoms of COVID, who has tested positive or has concerns about their exposure, to contact the COVID health team. And we have added 2 additional contact tracers to that team to be able to meet the needs of campus and hopefully have a rapid turnaround time. I think the other point that I'll make, Glenn, is as we head into the holidays, obviously folks are thinking about having some time off. They're thinking about having time together with family and friends. But I will also say that this is the year that maybe we don't invite Aunt Edna over for Thanksgiving dinner. And I say that tongue in cheek, but the reality is many, many, many cases are associated with family gatherings and people getting together for parties, for weddings, for unfortunately in some situations, funerals, but getting together and mixing, even with family members, has proved to be a very, very high risk activity. So I would suggest that people limit the exposure to others, particularly those that are vulnerable, the elderly, those with what we call comorbidities, diseases that increase their risk for complications of COVID, and minimize that kind of activity over the holidays this year. Hopefully it's just this year. We've gotten good news in the last week on vaccine development. And later this year and next holiday season, cross our fingers, we'll be back to normal and be able to have all those fun holiday traditions back in our lives. It's extremely important that folks, if they have any symptoms of illness, that they stay home from coming into work. Um, we need to continue to wear our face coverings. We need to continue to wash hands, use hand sanitizer. So we need to build those into our workflows, into our daily routine, to make sure that we're still decreasing the risk of transmission of COVID, because it's very, very common, very prevalent in our community. And I'll tell you one other thing. We're seeing a few cases of severe illness. We have our first ISU employee that has been admitted to the intensive care unit here in Pocatello, at least the first that we're aware of. And it's very, very concerning to see that. I will also say that we are seeing more what we call community spread, where we can't identify a contact and people are just picking the illness up as part of their daily activities and out in the community. So wear your face mask when you're not at work. Make sure you're using hand sanitizer or washing your hands frequently, and make sure that you're doing everything as well as when you're on campus, when you're off campus, because that's really critical to keep decreasing the risk of spread of COVID. It's a very, very significant illness. And I will say today, I think, is Veterans Day. Our veterans are being affected tremendously by this virus, to the point that they've almost had to close down the Boise Veterans Medical Center for all care except for acute care and care of COVID related conditions in our veterans. And so if we can bring up veterans today and celebrate them, let's celebrate them by fighting this enemy the same way we'd fight another enemy of the United States. And so, Glenn, that's what I have for you in terms of updates about COVID. But if there are questions, I'm happy to hang around and answer any of those as well.
We're about 1 minute away from questions. So thank you, Rex. And I want to build off of the comments Rex made. There is an individual who we haven't mentioned yet today, who has been working tirelessly to coordinate all of the communication around the Employee Operations Center, all of the activities and communications, the coordinating role that Chris Boyce has had with the emergency management, the EOC, is just amazing. When this all started, I don't think he could ever have imagined that he'd be managing a university through a pandemic. But when this, at the very beginning, Chris was coordinating daily meetings there's probably about anywhere from 20 to 30 people on these calls every morning. It then went back to 3 days a week, and now it's just been 2 days a week. But on the other days, Chris is still monitoring what's happening with the weather. Do we have a weather event we need to worry about? What else is happening that we need to be aware of? Coordinating with various other agencies. He coordinated our FEMA application. So it's really sad for me to announce, and most of you probably have heard this, but Chris will be leaving us in a couple of weeks. He'll be going back to Texas. He has a great career opportunity that while we appreciate him here and need him here, Texas is calling. So I just want to acknowledge the contributions that you've made, Chris, in a little over a year and a half that you've been here, and through everything you've done through the EOC. Now with that, I know that went about 10 minutes longer than what I had hoped, but Rex and I do not have to get off for admin council promptly at 10, since that's been pushed back a little bit, so we could stay over a little depending on the questions you have. And so now it's time for any questions you have for Rex or I. or comments?
Hi, Glenn. We do have one question.
Okay.
It is, with students not returning to campus after Thanksgiving, are staff still supposed to come to work?
Yes, thank you for that question. And there'll be some additional guidance, I believe, coming out in the near term on that. Campus is still open, but what we have said is classes will not be held after Thanksgiving, except for in some of those classes that absolutely had to have face-to-face activities. But students still need to come to campus and faculty need to come to campus to access the network, to access the library. They still live in some of our housing units. So campus will be open. What we have been asked to do is to treat it just like we did this summer, where those of you who are considered essential workers who have to be on campus, it's business as usual. For those of you who can work from home, with, and working through with your supervisor what those arrangements are, you just continue to work from home. So no, campus isn't closed. It's just that we do not have classrooms or classes meeting after the Tuesday before Thanksgiving.
Thanks, Glenn. What else can you tell us about the plans for next semester?
I think it'll start like we did this semester, where we have a number of courses that are in a high flex environment so that we can have those on-campus experience for students who want to be here. There will be some courses that'll be online. Barring a miracle with a vaccine coming out next week and the second dose being required 3 weeks later, I don't think we're going to be in any better position than we are, hopefully not any worse position than we are right now. So I think what you saw this fall, I believe, is what you'll see in the spring. Rex, do you concur with that?
Yeah, I do agree, Glenn. I think academically, operationally, we will see a continuation of what we've hopefully gotten kind of used to over the course of the fall. I will say, and I meant to mention this during my little update, the university is looking at ways to increase asymptomatic testing on campus. Obviously, we're doing some of that in our student athletes at the present time so that they'll be eligible for competitions, at least under the current status of things. But we're looking at expanding that testing and surveillance work over the course of the holiday break and being ready to stand up some additional testing capacity on campus. That may include some screening of faculty and staff, but it's probably more likely going to enhance our ability to do contact tracing and follow-up related to exposures amongst employees and students. We'll also be using it in high-risk groups like our dorms to be able to do surveillance and follow-up when we do have some cases in those settings. So we're ramping up our testing capacity. For the longest time, that's been mostly unavailable or limited to use in people that were actively ill. And now testing kits and the availability of new testing methods are allowing us to have a greater opportunity to do testing, to kind of manage campus operations and hopefully nail down potential exposures in a quick way.
I mean, I may need help from Rex and Ginny on this because I don't pay as much attention to the academic calendar as maybe I should. We are going to start the spring semester at the same time as we were planning to. However, spring break is being pushed back to the week before finals, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
And then it will be just like this fall where students go up to Thanksgiving in the classroom. And then the week after Thanksgiving is still a week of school. It's when projects are due. It's when final exams are given. But none of those will be based none of those should be based on campus, with the idea that those who go home at Thanksgiving don't need to come back, and they don't need to take things home, but if they take something from here home, they do, but if they get something at home or if they get something on vacation, they don't bring it back. And so that's the same concept behind spring break in the spring. And I have to tell you that the entire admin council and president really struggled with what do we do with spring break? Because we know that the spring semester is a long haul, and students and faculty and frankly staff look forward to that break in that March timeframe. But we just felt there was too much of a risk that we can't tell students you can't go to Mexico, you can't go traveling around the country. And we just felt that to send everybody away in the middle of the semester and then bring them all back, the risk to the community for spread was much greater. So that's the why behind pushing it out further.
Yeah, and Ginny did share the link to the academic calendar that's been tweaked in the chat box. Spring break will be April 26th through 30, and then finals week is May 3 through 7, the very next week. And will likely be online finals like we have this semester. Commencement is currently scheduled for April 24th, so just before that spring break period. And that will include the full year of graduates, right? The fall as well as spring graduates. I'm sorry, the August summer graduates as well as the spring graduates. We're going to have a virtual graduation this fall.
Rex, we have a follow-up question with COVID testing. Can we opt to get a test without a doctor's order?
So there are places where you can get a test without a doctor's order. In fact, some of the local pharmacies are offering that. I believe Albertsons has testing capacity now for tests. It's a mail-in test, if I remember right. And they may have changed the testing methodology that they were using, but it was a saliva test where their saliva sample is sent in via FedEx, and you can usually get results back within 72 hours. If people have concerns about exposure and want to get tested, they can always contact University Health, and we have arrangements to get orders sent for testing to occur at the drive-up testing site up at Holt Arena. So even if you don't have a regular doctor in that kind of a setting, you call the health center, explain the situation, and in most cases they can get you a test ordered and just do it at the drive-through center at Holt.
Great, thanks. Thank you, Rex. So Glenn, what would you like us to focus on in order to feel motivated to end the semester strong?
I think it is any contacts that you've made with students over this semester. If you have a relationship with a student, just check in with them and ask them if they've registered for the spring. Ask them how this fall went and make that connection, because a lot of the research has shown that it's simple things like that that influence a student in wanting to come back, or a student that's on the fence, and make, it will help draw them in. So I think it's really keep a smile on your face for those of you who are on campus. I guess you have a mask on, it's hard to see, but we can still see smiles sometimes in eyes. But just keep a positive attitude. You all have made it to, we're within 2 weeks of finishing the semester and keeping open. And that was something a number of people were really worried at the start of the semester. How long can we keep the campus open. And barring any unforeseen thing in the next week, we will have done that. You will have done it. So it's a cause for celebration. And maybe even keep that in the back of your mind, that just because of the work that you all do, we were able to do that. And then for those of you in facilities who will be deep cleaning and sanitizing all of these spaces once the students are gone after next week, as you get into December, just keep in mind that what you're doing is going to keep the campus safe for all of us and our students. So those would be the things I'd like you to focus on in the next couple of weeks. And then finally, focus on your families when you're away from the job. Take time to be thankful for everything that's happened this year. There are a lot of positives. I know it's hard to see them sometimes given everything that's happened on the news, the pandemic, but there are a number of things we all can be thankful for. And let's focus on that. And I would just encourage you also, the person that's in the hospital is one of ours from our division. And I would just encourage you to keep that person in your thoughts and prayers in the coming days.
Great. Thanks, Glenn. That's all the questions that I see on my end. I'd love to turn it back over to you for any closing thoughts.
Okay. Well, again, thank you for coming. Thank you for coming in every day, whether that coming in is walking from your bedroom to your office at home, or walking from one side of your bedroom to another where your computer is set up, or whether you're actually coming into campus. Thank you for showing up, and not just showing up, but for caring and doing the work you've done. So if you have any questions, and feel free to email them to me. I know after these sessions, every once in a while, several of you do. So I just want to continue to encourage you to, send those questions to me or to anybody on our leadership team, and we'll be happy to answer those. So thank you.